Hello everybody, it's me, the man behind YouTube. This is another good video for you guys that I have been thinking of for a while, but because of the release of a new game coming that is licensed and it's a horror game, I think we all know what it is, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I decided to revisit a battle that is pretty old, but I wanted to see if they hold up still, as it's been a few years since people actually do this debate. Some still do. And that is Friday the 13th game versus Dead by Daylight. Now, I am going to base these games off of these four categories, and that is gameplay, cosmetics, intensity, and endgame. Now, intensity and endgame are kind of the same, but kind of not. Because I feel like the endgame is the most intense of any type of game. And I am going to be listing on which one does it better when it comes to intensity. And I feel like intensity throughout the game is just a whole different thing. But, like I said, we're going to get into that more when we get into those categories. Gameplay. Alright. Gameplay is really just a difficult one for both games. You can be biased on this one if you want. I'm trying to be fair as possible because I have been playing both games frequently back to back a lot recently. So it's not just me saying, oh, I think Friday the 13th is better and not being able to play Dead by Daylight. No, I've played both of them pretty equally and frequently. So, because of that, I am giving my fair thing of what I think is better gameplay. Now, when it comes to gameplay, Friday the 13th has two options. You can be a survivor having a few routes to escape. You can either take the boat, take the car, call the cops, and the alternative, if all that fails and you have all the right parts, kill Jason. And for the counselor side, it's pretty fun to do that. So I think that Friday the 13th has it when it comes to what you want to do when you are a counselor. You have multiple options to escape, especially because you have 8 people in the lobby. So majority of the time, you can escape, or at least one group. Now for Killer is also a very fun thing, except there's only one killer, Jason Voorhees. Now, there may only be one main killer, but he has different variations of himself, listing through part 2 through 9 and exclusively Savini. And main objective, kill everybody. You have different types of abilities, including shift, morph, and sense, stalk, rage, like all that type of stuff. So you have your abilities, you have throwing knives, you have traps. So you can have different types of play styles, and it's really, 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 really good. For Dead by Daylight, I'm going to say this right now, it's really fun. But I am going to say that Friday the 13th will probably win this category, only for a few options. One, because Dead by Daylight can get repetitive, and what I mean by that is that when you're a survivor, survivor's main objective is to do 5 generators and then open a gate and survive. May seem easy, but if you're going against an experienced killer, it's pretty hard majority of the time. But that does not mean it does not get repetitive. It gets repetitive, it gets boring sometimes, doing the same thing over and over and over again. The only unexpectancy when you're playing Dead by Daylight as a survivor is what killer you're going against. And that's what makes it somewhat interesting every time you play. Now, we'll talk about more of that when I get into intensity. But I will say this right now, that it does get boring after a while. Same thing goes for killer. Killer, you have a vast majority of killers with vast majorities of abilities, but I will say that is the only thing that in this category that Dead by Daylight will win. And that reason being is because the vast majority of killers. So you really won't get bored of all of the killers, even though majority of them you have to pay for. So I can't really speak freely on all of them. But I will say that the ones that you are acquired with when you start the game, beautiful killers to play, and it's a lot of fun. but the point is going to go to Friday on this one. Okay, now, cosmetics. This one is not too fair for Friday the 13th game. Like the footage I'm showing, this is all of the unreleased content, including the maps. Now, when I say cosmetics, of course I mean skins, maps, all that type of stuff that's in the games. That makes the game pretty fun. Now, like I said, Friday the 13th only has one killer, Jason Voorhees, and Jason Voorhees has a variety of looks and a variety of set strengths and weaknesses. And there are only a few Jasons that actually have special skins. All of them have bloody skins at certain levels that you unlock them at. And the heavy bloody skins are, of course, the ones that are the last ones that you get. Now, when it comes to all of these type of skins, you know, they're okay. And, of course, you have Retro Jason, but that's really about it, besides Roy Burns having 2 pairs of overalls. And as far as survivors go, like I said, majority of the content that was supposed to be in the game, but hasn't because of the lawsuit, they didn't have too many cosmetics. I'll put some up on screen, but okay, now, intensity is pretty hard to give any of these games because it's pretty hard to decide. I would say it is a tie, but at the same time, you gotta look at the perspective. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna look at pro player perspectives from both games and new players from both games. Now, let's say that it's a survivor that is a newcomer and a pro player, even though that usually doesn't happen in Dead by Daylight because of their matchmaking stability. But in some cases, let's say this happens like in a custom match or something. It is very intense for a noob survivor to go against a pro player always. So, if that's the case, the intensity is pretty high, especially if you have to repair gens, try to hide, try to see if you can do your best and escape. And it's always intense when the killer is around because they have a heartbeat and they're chase themed. So that is pretty intense for it, and if it's vice versa, it's not really intense for the killer if they're a noob, it's just annoying. So I can't really say it's intense, it's just annoying, especially if they know they have been fouled. It's not really intense for them, it's just annoying, like I said. But versus Friday the 13th, if it is a pro Jason versus counselors, again, very, very intense. Very intense because they don't know where Jason is, if he's good with his shift grabs, if he's good with his throwing knives. If you don't know where he is, it's intense. Now, again, like I said, if it's vice versa and the Jason is a noob and the counselor is a pro at what they do, it's just annoying for them. Very, very annoying. So, this category, I'm going to have to give both games a tie because they're both intense from survivor perspectives. They're noobs, but if the survivors and counselors are pros, it's not intense for anybody. The killers may most likely will just rage quit and leave the game, see if they can get into another lobby, because it's just annoying to them. So, for this one, I'm giving it a tie. Okay, Endgame is going to be the tiebreaker for this, and it doesn't even come close when it comes to how I compare it. Dead by Daylight we'll look at first. Now, let's put this scenario in mind. Let's say that all of the gens are almost done. There's that one gen that has to be done. The killer is trying to kill all of them, put you on hooks. Maybe you're not even on your second hook yet. And the killer gets you and they can escape. And the generator is finished and the gate is done. That killer most likely is going to punch the air, know he's been founded for, and when you open the gate, having a bunch of flashlights in your face multiple times, he will have to deal with the teabagging survivors at the end of the exit gate and call it a game. It's not really intense, it's just annoying, like I said, majority of the time for the killer. It's not really intense, it doesn't get your heart pumping. Now, if there was the scenario where the survivor is only one, all of them either are dead, which is most likely the case in this scenario, or one is all of them escape. It does put some intensity for that endgame, because in my opinion, I will specify here, the endgame or the climax is most likely the best part of a horror game, especially if it's multiplayer. I don't care what anyone says, that is the main thing. If you want a good horror game with multiplayer, you have to have a good endgame. And if it's one survivor and the killer's coming to get you, that's very intense for the survivor's side. And it's also pretty intense for the killer. Unless they know where they are, it's not intense for them at all. They close the hatch, they set the timer. It's not intense for them because they know they're going to die anyway. So, it's not really intense for them. So, that one is pretty lopsided. It's not really intense. Like I said, like I brought up in the intensity before category, it can either just be intense for a noob or not. It doesn't really matter. But the intensity in Dead by Daylight when it comes to its endgame, it's there, but it's not peak as Friday the 13th. And Friday the 13th will take the cake on this one, and I will tell you why. The 2 minutes left soundtrack is probably the most heart-racing, the most blood-inducing thing ever a game has ever created when it comes to horror. If you are in that 2-minute zone as Jason or the counselor, your heart is pumping because you don't know which one is going to get out alive. You don't know which one is going to win the game. You have 2 minutes left, the score is playing. The majority of the time it is intense, unless there is that case scenario where the Jason is bad, he hasn't gotten anybody in the game, and he knows he's been fouled. That's a different story. But let's say there's only one counselor left, 2 counselors left. It's still intense because the Jason can still get you in 2 minutes of time. You don't know. And Jason has to get them in those 2 minutes of time, so it is intense for them. Another intensity factor for it in an endgame, and I will call this an endgame for Jason, is if his mask is off, they have the sweater, and Tommy is around with an axe or a machete. That is also intense. They have to find out if they can kill Jason, and if Jason can kill them before they kill him. That is another thing they have that intensifies that endgame for Jason. So, with all that being said, in my opinion, I really think that Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th are 2 great horror games. And I'm definitely going to do a review on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game when it comes out. And I probably will do a versus video on, all 3 games. Probably bring up these categories again. But for now, before it comes out, I think that Friday the 13th is a superior horror game, even though the lawsuit founded it as, just lost in the past. I honestly think that Friday the 13th would have probably crushed Dead by Daylight if the lawsuit never happened. But with all that being said, guys, Friday the 13th wins this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.